Hello, I'm Michael Topham, technical writer for digital photo, and welcome to this masterclass video where we're going to take a detailed look at Photoshop's transform tools. The 6 transform tools that we're going to be taking a look at in this video are scale, rotate, skew, distort, perspective, and we'll also see how the free transform command works with a series of different keyboard shortcuts. Before we go on and see how we can correct distortion and converging verticals with the transform tools, let's first take a basic look at them on their own and see how they can affect a simple square in a document. On this month's digital photo CD, you'll find a file named square_document.jpg, and once you've located that, just load it up into Photoshop. You should be able to see the guidelines straight away on the document, and if you can't, head up to View, go down to Show, and make sure you've got a tick alongside Guides. We're looking to create a coloured square in the centre of this document, so move over to the toolbox and pick out the Rectangle tool, and then move up into the Options bar and make sure that you're selected on Shape Layers, make sure you're selected on the Rectangle tool, and move across and click on Colour. For this example, I'm going to go for a blue colour, and once you click OK, you'll be able to see how your foreground colour has changed in the toolbox. Make sure you can see your Layers palette by going up to Window, and then down to Layers, and then we're going to very simply just draw out a square shape in the centre of this document using our guidelines, and once you've done that, we can clear our guides by going up to View, down to Show, across, and unticking the tick alongside Guides. With the Layers palette up on your screen, you'll see that there are now 2 layers. We've got our main background layer, and we've also got our new shape layer that we've created with the Rectangle tool. Moving up to Edit in the menu bar, and then scrolling down to Transform, shows the list of different transform tools. And we're going to select Scale, which lets us easily change the size of an image or square, as in this example. There are 2 shortcuts for adjusting the scale in an image. Holding the Shift key and dragging one of the corner handles keeps the square in proportion. When we fancy increasing or decreasing the size from the centre, try holding down Shift and Alt at the same time, and again use the corner handles to alter the scale. If we don't want to apply a transformation on our screen, we can very easily just return to where we were a minute ago by hitting the Escape key on the keyboard. Moving up to Edit in the menu bar, going down to Transform again, and this time selecting Rotate, shows that there's no visual difference to that of scale on the screen. We can still see that we've got the same corner and side handles. We can rotate manually by moving the cursor beneath the shape and dragging with the 2-sided arrows, or if you want to rotate by 15-degree increments, you can hold down Shift at the same time. The point in the middle of the square is known as the reference point, and this can be moved and dragged to any new position within the square. It's used to control the centre of rotation, and you can also specify the point of rotation up in the options bar using the reference point location. If I just click on the top left box there, you'll be able to see how the reference point has been moved up to the top left of my square. For this example, I'm just going to move it down very slightly. I'm just going to move my cursor beneath the square and rotate, and you'll now be able to see how that square is rotating around that reference point. Again, if we don't want to apply our transformation, we very simply just hit the Escape key. The next transform tool in the list to look at is Skew. Let's go to Edit, down to Transform, and select Skew. To skew an image or a document, you can take hold of a side handle and move it left, and you can move it right. Holding Control and Alt at the same time and moving a side handle allows you to skew the opposite side of your square at the same time. So make sure that you give that keyboard shortcut a go for yourself. The next 2 transform tools, Distort and Perspective, are comparable to each other, and the results from using them can be very similar. Going up to Edit, down to Transform, and onto distort lets us drag our corner handles to stretch out the bounding box. With distort selected, you can move the corner handles in any direction, and when we're using the free transform a little later, we'll be able to see how we can perform a free distortion by holding down with the Control and Shift keys. A neat way of quickly selecting the next perspective transform tool is to right-click in the document, which loads up the transform tool list. Moving down and selecting perspective, we can adjust the perspective accordingly by dragging out the transform corner handles. If we move one of the corner handles up, it's even possible to flip the square over, and the same can be done with an image. If you ever make a transformation that you're not entirely happy with, remember that keyboard shortcut that we've used a couple of times already. You can very simply hit the escape key to return to where you started from. The best way of learning about the transform tools is to try them out using this very simple square document. Once you've got a good idea of how the corner handles can be dragged and moved around, you'll have a much better understanding before you go ahead and use them in your images. You can now close down this square document, and we're now going to see how we can use the free transform command to control the transform tools in a real image. Head up to File and down to Open, go into the Start Images folder on the DP/CD, and then load up the file firestation.jpg into Photoshop. Taking a brief look at this image, we can see that it's suffering from some rather severe distortion and converging verticals, and that's exactly what we're going to put right using the transform tools. Make sure that you can see your rulers clearly on your screen, and if you can't, go to View and then down to Rulers and make sure you've got a tick alongside them. We can see that this image has been taken on a slight angle, so we need to rotate it slightly anti-clockwise. Pull down a horizontal guideline from your rulers and align this with the pavement in the foreground. Next, we need to select the entire image, and the quickest way of doing that is by hitting Ctrl and A. And now we can go up to Edit, down to Transform, across and select Rotate. Move your cursor beneath the bottom right corner handle until you see the two arrows, and then we're just going to rotate the image very slowly anti-clockwise until the pavement is parallel with the guideline that we just created. So I think that's looking roughly parallel, so I'm going to stop there, and then to temporarily hide the guideline we can hit Control and the semicolon key. You'll notice that the image currently has some white corners around the outside, and we're going to remove these by increasing the scale of the image. Everything's a little bit tight on my screen at the moment, so I'm going to zoom out very slightly by hitting Ctrl and minus. We're now ready to enter free transform mode, and there's two ways of doing this. We can either go up to Edit and then down to free transform, or we can hit the keyboard shortcut, which is Ctrl and T. Hold down Shift and the Alt keys together and drag out the top right corner handle very slightly to remove these white edges. Once you've done that, you can use the cursor keys on your keyboard and just use the downwards arrow cursor key just to tap the image down very slightly so the building is more central in the frame. To ensure that the building is perfectly vertical and to lose any of those converging verticals, we can use vertical guidelines to help us. Go up into the menu bar and click on View, and then go down to Show and then click on Guides. Move over to the ruler on the left side and pull out a guideline from your rulers and align this with the fire station building. I'm just going to align it with the left corner edge. We now need to pull out another guideline, so go over to the rulers on the left, pull out another guideline and then align this with the edge of the building on the right, and then pull out another guideline, this time aligning it just to the right of that manhole cover. I'm just going to align it with the building and just place it about there. So with all our vertical guidelines now in place, we can start thinking about bringing this building back into line and correcting the distortion. Hold down Shift and Control at the same time and move up to the top right corner handle. we need to pull this outwards, and we need to pull it out until the edge of the building falls in line with the third guideline. So I'm just going to pull this out very slightly, and you'll be able to see there how the building is now starting to come in line with the third guideline that we created. You can now release the Shift and Control keys before moving down to the bottom right corner handle. Hold Shift and Control again and move this corner handle inwards very slightly, and you'll be able to see how the building is now in line with that third guideline that we made. If you feel that the top of the building isn't quite lining up with that guideline, you can just hold down Shift and Control again and then just drag out this top right corner handle very slightly, and now that is definitely hugging that third guideline. Zooming into the image by hitting Control and plus, the right of the building should now line up with the furthest right two guidelines, which it is. The only problem that we do have is the building isn't lining up with the first guideline that we made, and that's the area that we're now going to work on. To zoom back out, just hit Control and minus a couple of times. To bring the left edge of the fire station into line with the first guideline that we made, we're going to perform another distortion using the free transform command. Hold the Control key and drag out the top left corner handle until the left edge of the building falls in line with the first guideline. Releasing the mouse button and the Control key, you may find that this distortion that you've just made has had an effect on the right edge of the building. If this is the case, hold down the Control key and drag out the top right corner handle very slightly. It's a really good idea to make a final check of the image and the verticals before we commit to applying the transformation. Zoom into 50% by holding Control and hitting the plus key a few times, and check that the front of the fire station is now in line with the guidelines that we created earlier. If you need to move around the image, hold down on the spacebar and that'll enter the hand tool so you can move about the image. Zoom out to fit on screen by holding Control and 0, and make any last transform adjustments should you need to, holding down the Control key and dragging any of the corner handles. To apply the transformation, we can very simply hit the Enter key. If you want to see the vast improvement between before and after, hit Control and Z a couple of times, and that will show the start image and the transformed image. There's such a difference between the two. To finish off, we're going to crop the image very slightly, and then we're going to save it. To remove those guidelines on your screen, we can hit the Control and semicolon key, or you could have gone up to View, down to Show, and then unticked Guides. Move across into the toolbox and pick out the Crop tool, and use it to draw out a crop box across the whole image. Move up into the Options bar and make sure the opacity is set to 100%. And then hold down the Shift key and just drag in from the top left very slightly. To apply your new crop, you can very simply hit the Enter key. You can now save the file by going up to File and then down to Save As. Choose the location where you'd like to save the file and give it the new file name firestationvertical.jpg before clicking on Save. Once you've saved your final version, you can load up the file firestation.jpg again into Photoshop and position it alongside the edited file to check out how the image has been transformed thanks to using Photoshop's transform tools. I hope you've enjoyed this month's masterclass video that's taken a good look at the transform tools. Don't forget that next month we're going to be studying the mighty warp tool, which is another fantastic transform tool that offers impressive control. I look forward to seeing you again very soon.